Don't answer the phone. It's not from the living. Have you ever received a phone call from someone who shouldn't be calling? A friend who died years ago, a number that doesn't exist, or a voice that knows too much about your life? Tonight, we bring you 5 terrifying real-life stories of phone calls from the other side. Calls from ghosts, spirits, or something far worse. Are you ready to pick up? 1. The final call from Flight 401. It was supposed to be a routine flight. On December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was en route from New York to Miami, and disaster struck. The plane crashed into the murky Florida Everglades, killing over 100 people instantly. Survivors spoke of eerie whispers in the darkness before help arrived, but the horror didn't end there. A month after the crash, employees of Eastern Airlines began receiving strange phone calls. The first was from a flight attendant, Joan, who swore she had answered a call from a fellow crew member, Don Repo, except Don had died in the crash. His voice was hoarse, almost distorted, as he murmured, "It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident," before the line cut off. Other employees reported similar calls, some from passengers who perished that night. The most chilling part, the calls never showed up on phone records. Even stranger parts of Flight 401 were salvaged and reused in other planes, and those planes soon became the site of terrifying hauntings. Pilots and passengers alike reported seeing Don Repo's reflection in cockpit windows, staring back at them with lifeless eyes. 2. The haunted phone booth of Japan. In a quiet town in Japan, standing alone on a hill overlooking the sea, is a strange white telephone booth. It is called the Wind Phone, and it was placed there after the 2011 tsunami that took the lives of over 15,000 people. But some visitors have experienced something terrifying. A man came one night to speak to his wife, who had drowned in the disaster. As he picked up the receiver, static crackled in his ear. Then he heard her voice. "I never left," she whispered. The line went dead. Others have reported hearing whispers from the phone, sometimes even their own name spoken back to them. Paranormal experts believe the Wind Phone is more than just a symbol of grief. It may be a portal to something beyond. 3. The Soldier's Last Message. In 2008, Jill, a young woman from Ohio, was woken up in the middle of the night by the ringing of her phone. Half asleep, she glanced at the caller ID and saw it was her brother, Brian, a U.S. soldier stationed in Iraq. Confused but relieved, she answered. "Brian," she whispered, static. Then his voice came through. "Jill, help me." The line went dead. Shaking, she tried to call him back, but the number was out of service. The next morning, 2 soldiers knocked on her door. They came to deliver devastating news. Brian had been killed in combat 3 days ago. At first, she thought it was some cruel mistake, but when she checked her phone, the call wasn't listed in her call history. Later, she found out that other soldiers in Brian's unit had similar experiences, messages from fallen comrades pleading for help just before their deaths were officially announced. Some believe it was just a strange glitch. Others think it was something much darker, a soul caught between life and death, reaching out one last time for the phone that kept ringing in the graveyard. Late one night, a cemetery security guard in London kept hearing the distant ringing of a payphone. It was coming from deep inside the graveyard. He followed the sound, his flashlight flickering as he moved through the fog. Cautiously, he picked up the receiver. Silence, then soft breathing. A chill ran down his spine. "Who's there?" he asked. No answer, just more breathing. Then a whisper. "I'm still here." The guard dropped the receiver and ran. The next day, out of curiosity, he traced the phone number. It was registered to a woman buried in the cemetery, and she had been buried with her phone. Her family later exhumed the coffin. Inside, they found her phone resting on her chest. The battery had long since died, but somehow it had still been ringing. 5. The unknown caller who knew too much. In 1994, a German family started receiving disturbing phone calls late at night. At first, it was just heavy breathing. Then the voice began describing things happening in their home in real time. "Your daughter just went upstairs at once, said your wife is in the kitchen." Frightened, they called the police, but no signs of wiretapping were found. One evening, the father decided to confront the caller. "Who are you?" he demanded. There was a pause. Then the voice whispered, "I've always been here." The call cut off. The family moved out soon after, but the new owners reported the same eerie calls. Years later, they discovered that the house was built over an old cemetery, and some of the graves had never been moved. 5 stories, 5 terrifying phone calls. But they all share one thing in common. These calls should never have been possible. A message from a dead friend, a mother calling from beyond the grave, a soldier's last desperate cry for help, a ringing phone in an empty graveyard, and a voice that knew everything too much. But the real question is, were these just lost souls, or something much darker? What if one day your phone rings at midnight, and when you pick up, there's only silence? Would you dare to answer? Like and subscribe, or your phone might ring tonight.